One one thing that I want to mention, all of the authors in this book have other works that they've written. Like they've all written professionally. They've all got different amounts of writing. Cohen and Mittman especially are interesting because of the huge volumes of work that they've produced. But I think one of the differences that we find between Mittman and Cohen, even though we read them back to back, it makes them really good comparison. I think Mittman's chapter is a very good reflection of his writing. That you read it and you think, oh, this is really interesting, this is really good. And I'm curious what you think about the quality of Cohen's prose. I've read quite a bit of his stuff. I've read a few of his books, I've read a bunch of his articles. And in comparison, this is very, the prose are lifeless, right? But he's not really telling a compelling story. It seems like an awful lot of humble brag, where he's like um, difficult to relate to. I think in a few ways. One of the things that makes Cohen's writing interesting, or part of the brilliance of his work, is that he seems like he would much rather be a philosopher, that he's always finding some sort of philosophical theory or idea, and then he's working through it using medieval literature. And that's what makes his work, generally speaking, a little bit more exciting than others. His first book was called Of Giants, and it's a study of giants in medieval literature. He's done quite a few things like collections of essays. So this is the post-colonial Middle Ages, where he wrote the introduction and he wrote one of the chapters. And each of the chapters focuses on different ways that we could take primarily the ideas of Edward Said, but also people like Homi Bhabha or Spivak, and apply them to this kind of what's usually called like pre-colonial literature. The titles aren't really all that accurate, but that's kind of what people have landed on. He's also got books like Medieval Identity Machines, which is largely about ways in which identity was formulated in the Middle Ages. It's an interesting book. It's fascinating. I don't think it's necessarily the best book on the topic, but it is a valuable contribution to the field. One of the things that Cohen's kind of most famous for is a book that he edited in the mid 90s, I think 1995, called Monster Theory. Almost all of his writing in the past few years has been about monsters. That he's very focused on what are the monsters of medieval literature, what are they doing, what might they represent, where do they come from, what are they responding to, and how have they endured since then. That's his chapter in that book, which is called Monster Culture or the Seven Theses, is something that I quite often assign my students, mostly because it's a very difficult and inaccessible work. But once you understand the ideas, students seem to really enjoy it. And they seem to find it very relevant, even though it's dated and overly complex. And I usually assign it as intentionally bad writing, right? That it's writing that is supposed to make you feel like you're not as intelligent as the author. But what I'm going to do is read you the first of the seven theses real quick so you can get a sense of what Cohen's writing sounds like in different contexts. When he's writing, I think writing about something that he actually wants to write about, whereas I don't think he really wanted to do this chapter. I think that's why we have these kind of recycled blog posts and Facebook updates. Um, so this book is 2015. The material that he brings forward is from roughly 2010, 2011. The book that I'm going to be reading from is 95. So it's not a difference of experience because this book that I'm going to be reading from came quite a bit earlier. So this is the first thesis of the 7 theses. The thesis is titled Thesis 1: The monster's body is a cultural body. Vampires, burial, death. Inter the corpse where the road forks, so that when it springs from the grave, it will not know which path to follow. Drive a stake through its heart. It will be stuck to the ground at the fork. It will haunt that place that leads to many places, that point of indecision. Behead the corpse, so that, acephalic, it will not know itself as subject, only as pure body. The monster is born at this metaphorical crossroads as an embodiment of a certain cultural moment, of a time, a feeling, and a place. The monster's body quite literally incorporates fear, desire, anxiety, and fantasy, giving them a life and an uncanny independence. The monstrous body is pure culture, a construct and a projection. The monster exists only to be read. The monstrum is etymologically, quote, that which reveals, unquote, quote, that which warns, unquote, a glyph that seeks a hierophant. Like the letter on the page, the monster signifies something other than itself. It is always a displacement, always inhabits the gap between the time of upheaval that created it and the moment into which it is received, to be born again. These epistemological spaces between the monster's bones are Derrida's familiar chasm of deference, the genetic uncertainty principle, the essence of the monster's vitality, the reason it always rises from the dissection table as its secrets are about to be revealed and vanishes into the night. So that's the first thesis. It's very short, it's less than a page. And as you can tell, the cadence to the prose, the imagery that he's invoking, it all has a very different tone than two versions of the same aphorism seem equally true. Habit and routine are the nemesis of invention, and habit and routine are the precondition of invention. When it comes to working, I need a familiar time, schedule, and space. And I need to break out of this regularity sometimes, since it offers the ingredients not only for accomplishment, but boredom.